Percent Podcast.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's show, I just want to introduce this month's sponsor, Aavegotchi. Aavegotchis are on-chain collectible ghosts staked with Aave's interest-generating A tokens. Compete for player rewards by earning XP, leveling up, and increasing the rarity of your Aavegotchi friend. Owned by the community, Aavegotchi is governed by the Aavegotchi DAO and the native eco-governance token, Ghost, or GHST. Summon your first Aavegotchi today and join the future of DeFi staked NFT avatars. Follow Aavegotchi on Twitter at Aavegotchi, AAVEGOTCHI, or on Discord at discord.gg/6R2PE58. That's discord.gg/6R2PE58. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, it's Matthew. Welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show. Really excited for our episode today. We had an awesome guest. Snowfro joined us. He's talking all about a vending machine for high-end on-chain generative art, artblocks.io. Snowfro talks about the genesis story behind artblocks, how he really only started coding relatively recently, which is bonkers considering how technical the project seems, especially from afar. Of course, we dive into the on-chain guts of the project. We go into a lot of exciting elements that I haven't heard a lot of other projects talk about. Like, for example, Snowfro and Artblocks have set up this independent board to help advise the creators that are launching new projects on Artblocks, to help keep in mind some key factors like the actual user base and the number of NFTs to mint, making sure that collectors don't get stretched too thin. It's just some really great insights overall. I hope everyone enjoys this episode. We definitely go deep. Big thank you to Snowfro for joining us and sharing so much. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the conversation that Rizzle and I had with Snowfro about artblocks.io. Okay, Snowfro, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show.
Hey, everyone.
So to get started, I know people who've been longtime members of the WHIP know who you are, and people that are obviously tuned into the high end of the NFT space and are part of the on-chain gang for sure know who you are. But for everyone else, I think it would be really cool if you could give a little introduction about who you are and kind of what you've been doing in the metaverse.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Eric, also known as Snowfro amongst my my internet friends, and I am a huge blockchain nerd and also a generative art nerd, and I just really like anything that has to do with technology. So I stumbled into crypto in 2017. I think I bought my first Bitcoin on New Year's Eve 2016. Kind of had this panic moment that it was just time to buy it, and I stumbled into Ethereum immediately after that, and I just kind of never really looked back. There's something mind-blowing to me about smart contracts. And kind of, early history of kind of where I'm coming from is, I was there on the day that you could claim CryptoPunks. And to me, the idea of a CryptoPunk was this crazy thing that you could have ownership of something that's a digital asset. And back then, obviously, it was pretty innovative. So I kind of killed myself that day to claim a bunch of CryptoPunks. And that alone just kind of reinforced my thoughts on Ethereum and smart contracts. And that's kind of what set me on this crazy 3-year track of spending a lot of my awake time on Discord. Talking to other blockchain nerds. And so, that's where I'm at. So then obviously at the end of November, I launched Artblocks, which I'd been working on for a long time, but it was kind of this journey that I think has kind of made it what it is and made me who I am. And that journey is really just kind of hanging out with a whole bunch of people that I look up to big time in the blockchain space for those 3 years.
Dude, you've obviously also got some art nerd skills up your sleeve too, or at least like a passion for art nerd stuff to do the art blocks thing. And just curious to know like where the concept came from. And, it's something that I feel like so many projects have been coming out recently that have quickly become overlooked just because the everything is flooded with new projects and everything. And this is one that I feel like didn't come out with like a big press release or a lot of PR. You were obviously on the whip, but as time has gone on, I see it continuously popping up in my Twitter feed. It's like obviously gaining traction. You got the on-chain thing going for you, but I'm interested to hear from your angle, like the concept behind it and why you feel like it's gained so much traction, especially in the last month or so.
Yeah, well, the origin of the project kind of goes back to that claiming of the CryptoPunks, right? So like I selfishly claimed a ton of really kind of rare CryptoPunks, and literally while I was claiming it, and I was in the process of kind of writing a couple really basic smart contracts, just proof of concept to myself. I was sitting there going, man, like why? Yes, I was able to sync my wallet faster. And yes, I might be stupid enough to be spending money on claiming this 8-bit cartoon. But like, why do I get to choose the ones that I want? Right. And then just with the little bit of knowledge that I had about blockchain technology at the time, I mean, I was only 6 months in, I was like, man, the blockchain provides, it's not a purely perfectly random, but it provides a bunch of pseudo random information. Why not let me claim and not know exactly what I'm going to get? So that's literally when like the idea was born from kind of my selfish nature of claiming a bunch of CryptoPunks zombies.
We've done the same thing for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's some really nice people in the Discord that said that they came in and they claimed like 3 or 4 punks and then felt bad and wanted to leave more to the rest. And every time I read those comments, which happens a little bit, at least once every other month or so on Discord, I feel really guilty and feel really selfish, right? But I only claim 34. I mean, there's guys that claim 700. So I at least, put a stop to that. Also, I think if my wife, would have killed me if I would have kept claiming them. She's like, what are you doing? And it consumed an entire day because I had to sync the entire Ethereum blockchain, or at least what was missing. And, it was a mess. So, that is where the idea was kind of born. I also am a digital artist. I've been working in digital stuff for years. I mean, in 2000 and maybe 12 or 13, I deployed an app on the App Store for projection mapping, which is kind of like a light mapping.
Oh shit.
Type thing. I mean, way niche, like super, super niche, right? Like you have to have a projector, you have to have 3D objects to map on. But it was something that I got real excited about, and I thought that there was going to be a little bit of a future on it. I also then got tired of lining up projectors. And so then I started painting little 3-dimensional blocks and creating these big glued arrays of blocks. And I can share some pictures of that with you guys. And so the art that I've always kind of been involved with is very, kind of has a technical nature to it, but also very rainbow and colorful. And so that's kind of, simmering in the background while I'm, claiming these CryptoPunks and kind of deciding that it would be nice to kind of create a platform that would allow you to claim the CryptoPunks without the selfishness, right? Alongside that, I've been going to some conferences about Ethereum or just cryptocurrencies in general, but mainly Ethereum-based conferences. And I would sit there and just listen to project after project that I felt like was kind of fitting a square peg into a round hole. I love blockchain, and I was just as excited about it as the next guy, but I couldn't believe how many people were just trying to find a use for it. And I think that that's kind of been one of the major downfalls of blockchain, right? Is that there's so much hype, and then people are trying to find a use for it, and then people are trying to justify that is a good use for blockchain. So I've also been walking on eggshells since then, just making sure that anything that I actually am going to put out there doesn't feel strained or like I'm trying to do something that shouldn't necessarily exist. So to answer the second kind of part of your question, I've always been amazed at how much money some projects can raise for development and then either never get developed, or then they flop, or they do okay. But I don't think those sums of money are necessary to actually get a working product out there 80% of the time. 20% of the time, for sure. 80% of the time, no. And again, that kind of contributes to the downfall of this weird ICO, DeFi crypto madness that unfortunately is actually a barrier to entry to a lot of the outside world. So I've been kind of refining this idea and making sure, thinking about it in so many different ways to where I could put something out there that literally felt right. Didn't feel like it had to be hyped. It didn't feel like it had to be, it was a use case that utilized blockchain technology in a pure manner without straining anything. And I think that's why it's had the success that it has without having to be, promoted or hyped up a lot.
100%. I mean, it's a perfect use of the medium. It's native to it. It doesn't need that extra hype because of that fact, I think. But I mean, I think we could probably take a quick step back and actually kind of summarize or in a quick blurb, let folks know exactly what artblocks is in case they haven't logged onto artblocks.io. I mean, in my own mind, I like to think of it as a platform for on-chain generative art projects to launch. But I'm curious if you could kind of like give us your elevator pitch of how you describe what artblocks is.
Yeah, so I'm a wordy rambler, and so elevator pitch not always so good for me. But I'll try to
escalator pitch. Let's do escalator.
I'll make it as concise as I can. So I mean, basically, I'll keep it very concise. You have a piece of art, and the piece of art has multiple colored backgrounds that it could be. And so, you can have a piece of art that's red, and you can have a piece of art that's white, and you can have a piece of art that's blue. If a line of code is controlling what the color of that background is, at the very, very basic, that's a piece of generative art. Maybe we can't call it art, we'll call it content at that point. So what artblocks is basically enabling a programmer to write code that generates a piece of art or a piece of content. And using the byproducts of blockchain technology, we're controlling the way that product looks. So on a very simple level, you are generating art or content on the fly based on what you get when you put your penny in the machine, your quarter in the machine, and turn the knob as a seed, and what the programmer created in terms of lines of code to listen to that seed. So yeah, it's a generative ecosystem that literally just kind of is creating almost unlimited amounts of outputs or iterations based on the fact that a piece of code is listening to random numbers for controlling the way that it looks. I think that was one of the not so good escalator pitches. But did that make sense? Did I come across okay there?
Dude, that makes sense. So for people who have not like stumbled upon it or tried it out before, if I'm a new user, do I need to have like some sort of coding skills in order to make something decent? Or can I just essentially put a quarter in the machine, like you were saying, and have something random fly out?
Yeah. So as a collector, you can kind of think of it as a vending machine, although I definitely don't want to downplay art into the form of a vending machine, but you literally...
cool vending machine.
Yeah, really modern vending machine. So, you look at a gallery of examples of the type of output that you get. And if you like the style, like if you like the overall look, I mean, one might be blue and one might be red, but like if overall you like the general thing that you are seeing, then you put your quarter in the machine, in this case, Ethereum, or as of yesterday, we have a project that launched using the DAI stablecoin, right? So you put a quarter into the machine, and then the machine generates a new piece for you. Nobody in the world knows what that piece is going to look like before it is generated. And the code that the artist wrote is just sitting there excitedly waiting for you to create a token that stores information that is going to change the way that output looks. So it's like a little vending machine for art, a technical vending machine for art. You generate it, it's shown to you right after you generate it, and then you instantly own that as an NFT. And obviously your rights are controlled, your intellectual property controlled by whatever license the artist chooses for that piece.
So it's like a fine on-chain art generator, not to be confused with the vending machine. Random generator.
Yeah, I think art generator is a really good way to put it. Yeah.
I like that. That's really cool. And that there's a couple pieces there. I mean, the licensing that you touched on, I think that's really interesting. But I think for everyone else listening, especially to us, the on-chain aspect is something that is really, really appealing. speaking personally for your project. And within this NFT space, for me, I mean, Rizzle and I were just talking about this before the show. The on-chain aspects of these NFTs really, to me, they're like the high end of the market. They're the absolute top of the fine wine category. They're the best kind of like mechanical watches. Like they are like amazingly precious, in my opinion, and they will be valued as such heading forward. But I think there's a big gap in what people think they're collecting when it comes to NFTs, even on-chain NFTs, and what they're actually collecting. So I'm wondering if you could kind of unpack like what is actually on-chain when it comes to purchasing an art block NFT from any of the projects that are on your platform.
Yeah. So, I mean, on a very basic level, all of the logic, or a vast majority of the logic, in other words, the instructions of how to recreate that piece of art, are on chain. And there's a little bit of a nuance there to discuss in a second. But something that I think is really important is that oftentimes it seems like I'm not into the standard art markets, like because I'm so excited about the on-chain components of art blocks, and that's absolutely not the case. Like I still believe that what's happening on IPFS and what's happening on Known Origin and Super Rare is awesome, and mainly because something that has never happened before is happening, which is, even though we are potentially susceptible to some kind of failure of IPFS, which is not that likely, at least anytime soon, it still proves digital ownership. I mean, it proves ownership of a digital asset, and that never existed before. And art blocks could never have recorded sound. Art blocks could never have a high resolution photo. So there's some major limitations of art blocks, just because we can't store. It would cost $300,000 to store a relatively high resolution image on the Ethereum blockchain, right? So while I'm huge on the on-chain art component, it's because I believe that all the tools are there to make on-chain art really impactful and awesome. And something that maybe we get to discuss later too is just like what this does for the generative artist, which is just something that has never really kind of been available before, right? So in terms of what is stored on chain, there's a little bit of a wide range with art blocks, because you have things that use external libraries. So one of the most common, like the holy grail, I think, of creative coding journeys is probably using a platform called Processing, or P5JS. And, that's where I started. That's where my brother started. My brother's a professor in creative coding, or he's teaching a class on creative coding. And so, that's kind of where he starts his students. Processing is essentially just a very heavy, bulky library that enables people that may not have a bunch of coding experience to understand how to create something beautiful on a screen by following instructions. So it's just like programming a website, right? But programming a website has a bunch of things that make it not necessarily conducive for colorful things to appear on a screen. So processing, and then the web-based derivative of that called P5JS, it's a library that just enables artists or people to make beautiful things with less amount of intensity or research or coding skills than if you went the pure JavaScript route. So that library is also something that would cost $300,000 to host on Ethereum. So that library called P5JS, number one, is hosted on various CDNs, is probably on 5 of my hard drives, is literally like running on the back end of a huge amount of websites. So even though that library is not stored on Ethereum, and so some projects that are deploying using P5JS, they call that library. So what happens? So obviously, without that library, the image won't appear on the screen. But what's interesting about that library is just taking some logic and converting it into something that does appear on the screen. So if that library is making it easy for someone to draw a circle, then when you read the code, like if you look at the Chromie squiggle code, it's basically like 2,000 to 8,000 circles drawn in sequence over the course of a screen, and that's what makes it kind of flow. If you look at that code, if you look at the logic behind it, you can understand exactly from a geometrics perspective exactly what's happening. So while it's definitely not 100% on chain because that library is not 100% on chain. I do think that, for example, having something like a P5JS library, which is proliferated through the internet space, is still more sustainable than, for example, the possibility of a network like IPFS to not be sustainable, because right now it's being propped up and it's a very difficult, it's just not so straightforward to kind of manage that. Like, we don't know how IPFS will scale when people will start literally dumping their entire hard drives onto IPFS. So, and I'm a huge fan of IPFS. In fact, IPFS is one of the main reasons why I stuck around and kind of kept wanting to get deeper into code, because I think what they're doing is amazing and fantastic. And I really don't think it's going to go away. And I don't think people should not buy stuff because it's on IPFS. But again, we're kind of, like you said, like, we're here in the granular aspect of on-chain art. And yeah, as long as the concept of a CDN exists, or as long as, then you'll be able to see your artwork that's stored on artblocks. So that's one component, but artblocks is a flexible platform. So half of the scripts that are on artblocks now, or not half, I'm sorry, a little bit more than half of these scripts that'll be in artblocks in the next couple of weeks at least. But let's say the original ones were all built on P5JS or on processing.js. Those are actually pure JavaScript. So when you're viewing the art, when you're looking at the live view on artblocks, if you go to File, Save Website, and save the HTML file on your computer, all of the information that is necessary to generate that output is stored in that file. And all of that information is stored on the blockchain. So that is pure and simple 100% on-chain art. And while we definitely get excited about the pure JavaScript pieces, and I'm really into on-chain art, I didn't feel like it made sense to limit to just pure JavaScript pieces, because there's some crazy things that are happening in this world with libraries that would enable people to have 99% on-chain art, like, with readily available libraries like 3JS and processing, P5JS, and even A-Frame for virtual reality experiences. That it would, I thought it would be a huge mistake not to allow people to at least include an external library into their scripts to make it, predominantly on-chain versus 100% on-chain.
Dude, I've got to say, man, and I don't speak much developer language, but that's got to be like one of the best breakdowns of on-chain. I mean, I would 100%, dude, I hope you would consider doing like an intro to on-chain type of talk at the Token Smart conference in Vegas whenever that happens and everything, because seriously, man, like that was a really interesting breakdown that I feel like a lot of these conversations quickly go over my head, but you were able to break that down in very simplistic terms and clearly like know your stuff inside out. And I'm just genuinely curious, man. And I was joking around on the podcast the other day with Trizzle and Sandy about how, like, if you think where this space is going to be in 5 years, like the classic like employer question, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You're like essentially fooling yourself if you think where this space is going to be in 5 years. But considering your level of knowledge about like the on-chain aspect of not only art blocks but just NFTs in general, how do you see this shaking out, or what's like your prediction in terms of like, what the dominant format would be, or will it be like some combination of formats? Or, I've heard some rumors that IPFS will eventually migrate to some sort of on-chain type of protocol. But again, dude, this is not my area of expertise, but appreciate your like explain it like on 5 breakdown that I actually grasped a significant amount of.
Well, I mean, a lot of this wouldn't probably even be possible to talk about if it wasn't, for example, for like Avastars, right? Because they really kind of paved the way. There's been other things that are, relatively on chain, like obviously Autoglyphs kind of put that out there. But Avastars created a community where I would say maybe half of the community probably didn't even understand or care that it was on chain, and that's fine. I mean, that's like 10 times more than that would have been in 2017, right? So if Avastars would have launched in 2017, maybe 5% of the people would have cared or understood even what a smart contract is. Like our economy, our industry has grown in knowledgeability and expertise, I would say exponentially since 2017. So it's projects like that literally kind of just started setting that little seed of importance. And, I just remember talking to Jimmy about gas costs of deploying contracts back when kind of that was all happening and getting started, and like thousands of dollars. And I was like, man, that's crazy. But then once it's there, like it's just there. So, artblocks has had a long journey, but it was seeing that, literally that like motivation and that commitment to putting things on chain by Jimmy, and then Squiggly with Nate's project, like those things literally will live eternally. And as a hobby developer, like, sometimes you go through phases where you're like, man, is it really worth staying up till 3 a.m. for these things? And so you go through these waves, and it's things like that really just kind of pushed me through and got me to the point where I was confident enough that people would actually give a shit. Sorry, I'm not sure if you're allowed to cuss on this podcast, about,
for sure.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, I'll make an effort to do it even more. That's where I think our mindsets have changed. I think 2020 was major for that. And I really don't think Artblocks would be where it's at if it wasn't for what Avastars did. Right. So if you want to fast forward into 2025, man, that just made my brain hurt to even think about.
5,000 crypto years from now.
Yeah, literally. You really kind of have to think that like this is such the tip of the iceberg for NFTs in general. I think you put it in a really smart way when you said kind of like the high end NFT is this on-chain piece, but at the same time, like it costs the same amount of money to mint a piece on Artblocks than it costs to mint a piece on a traditional art platform, because the IPFS hash that you store on that token is exactly the same type of entropy or data that's being stored on an Artblocks token to generate a piece of art, right? So luckily, the platform doesn't make it any more expensive. In fact, even though I think the quality of the art at Artblocks is like exploding, just little by little, we're getting people. I mean, the other day, a artist that I've been following for years that was not even in the NFT space appeared in the artist application. Imagine like, I'm a huge nerd for like generative art. I'm a huge nerd for these artists. And I've been like, I like covet everything that they put out there. And all of a sudden, like someone that I've been following appears on this artist application out of nowhere. And it's like, wait, what? Like, so that kind of quality is going to be increasing over time. I wouldn't say quality. The projects we have now are amazing, but that kind of caliber of art, like people that are just much bigger and much more well-known and renowned. But the price of the art may not have to go up. In fact, maybe on the secondary markets, it'll go up because people will find so much value in it. And we're definitely not here to create a speculative platform. But what's amazing is that, I was having a conversation with an artist the other day. It's like, yeah, I normally put stuff on Super Rare for 7 ETH. And I'm like, whew, like, yeah. So that same artist is going to an artist kind of creates an algorithm and maybe some people spend a day, some people spend like 10 days. Like, an algorithm can be very complex, or it can be something that's really sweet and simple. And they might they might generate 5 outputs of that algorithm. But the hassle of generating and saving the image, putting it, like tokenizing it, and then advertising it and putting it out there means that you can't do it for $20. You just can't. Like, it's just, there's just not enough like effort in the world to do that. So what's happening is like that same artist is going to release, let's say 500 unique iterations of that same algorithm, not the one he would have put somewhere else, but an algorithm that he would have charged a lot more for. But instead of having to charge 5 or 7 ETH because he's like a major artist, he's going to make maybe 50 or 60 ETH. But each person is only going to have to spend 0.01 or 0.007 or whatever that price ends up being to own a 100% authentic, unique version of that person's art. And I think that's when you talk about it being kind of high end art, like that's to me what's going to be high end about it, is that you've got these artists that are unattainable to most people in their normal form, but all of a sudden are going to be producing art that is attainable to just about anyone in the crypto space that is, at least a relatively serious collector, to be able to spend $100 on a piece of art. In 5 years, what that's going to mean is that I think, I always refer to the concept of like, you go to IKEA and you spend $20 on a poster, but that has zero provenance. It has zero anything. I mean, it could be the coolest poster in the world, but then you go to your friend's house and they have the exact same freaking poster. Mm-hmm. And so, when we think about like 5 years down the line, Artblocks, and I have a million concepts and ideas, and there's just not enough time in the world to discuss them all. But one of the kind of overviews or overall concepts is that I do think that there's room in this world for like you to go to an IKEA and buy a piece of art that is recognizable as that same. Oh, it's like, oh, you got that at IKEA. Well, yeah, because it's the exact same face of Marilyn Monroe, right? But like it could be this recognizable piece that maybe you can only get at IKEA, and it's $20, and maybe they print it for you right there when you make it. But it's unique, it's pure, it's got provenance to it, it has ownership to it. And I think that's something that not just the crypto space, but the general public will actually be interested in and create an actual use case for blockchain technology. And in this case, the use case isn't the generative part. The use case is the provenance built into something that's not high end enough to deserve provenance in the normal art world. And do y'all know what provenance is?
Chronology of ownership.
Dude,
yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yeah, so the CryptoPunks today are valuable because there's been an ownership record since the day they were free. So imagine you go to like a neighborhood art market, and someone's got some really beautiful pieces of art there that they've hand painted in oil for like $20. That piece of art will stay probably $20 unless that artist somehow makes it into some big show and then goes into some bigger art circuits and then makes it, because there's really no provenance in that. Oh yeah, I bought it at the neighborhood market, and then I bought it from Jimmy, and then Jimmy bought it from someone else. And the reason CryptoPunks are worth $5,000 and $6,000 today is because they have provable scarcity, provable ownership, and provable provenance over the course of a 3-year period. And I really think that that's the root killer app. All of these other things are fun and games, but the killer app is provenance of every single asset that has ever been minted on the Ethereum blockchain. Is what's going to make the NFTs the killer app of, in my opinion, blockchain technology.
100%. I mean, the provenance. Yeah. Again, well said. But it's like, and you're touching on the traditional art world, like the provenance is basically impossible to track for like 99% of the art out there. You have to be a recognizable figure to kind of justify the effort to go into tracing back the provenance of a piece. And then the appraisal part as well is like another key aspect that really limits the value of any given work of art out there on the original market. Whereas, I mean, that's what blockchain does extremely well. It makes that sort of like verification process like dead simple and like insanely quick. And the fact that, I mean, we're talking about forever art, especially for art that's on chain, or at least as long as the Ethereum blockchain will be around, right? Which hopefully will be somehow forever. And that's just like, those parts are something that it never fails to kind of blow my mind when I think deeply about this art and this space that we're participating in. Just so bonkers to me.
Yeah, and I think that we have a really beautiful community both at artblocks and just in the general NFT space. And what that's doing is it's helping bootstrap projects and it's helping validate ideas. But I think that anybody that is developing something literally for the NFT space, like just for the crypto space, is maybe being a little bit short-sighted. I mean, unless it's like something that's meant to be used for crypto, right? So like, I'm not saying Trezor is being short-sighted. Like obviously, like there's a very specific use case there. But what I think we all need to be looking for, and again, I own a business in the design industry. I have a lot of clients. I'm constantly poking at them with blockchain stuff, right? So like in 2 years ago, I printed 2,000 iterations of a chromie squiggle, and I bought 2,000 little frames, like acrylic frames. And on each one of them, I wrote a little message saying, this is generated using the block hash of the Ethereum blockchain, because back then that's what artblocks did, is it read the block hash and it used that as the input. It's block number 4,700,000 and whatever. If you think this is interesting, send me a message, or actually I created a little application and you can claim this digitally on the Ethereum blockchain using the original art blocks. So out of the 2,000 people, I had 14 people actually go through the effort of installing MetaMask and claiming it. And that was in 2018. I think today, if I did the same thing, I would have 100 So I still don't think, I think 100 people would actually take the time to do it. I think that at this point I've kind of been so vocal. We've had art parties that we normally have in our showroom. We had them in crypto voxels, and we've had artists hanging their art there and talking about their works. And it was like, at least in the industry, it was actually a pretty good, successful party. But these people are slowly kind of growing and getting used to it, but we're still only up from 17 to what I would estimate to be 1,000. I do think that if you apply that same metric to the crypto space, maybe there's 30,000 of us. So yeah, if we go from, 30,000 to 120,000, we can expect that the crypto space will be a major market for everything that we're doing right now. But that can't be where it ends, right? Like, we can't look at the crypto market today as being like waiting for the non-crypto market to be onboarded onto crypto. Crypto needs to get to a point where you are not thinking about using it as crypto. You're just using it. And so I don't look at it as waiting for the masses to come into crypto. I literally am waiting. I'm looking at it the other way, where crypto will inevitably end up in the hands of the masses. And so artblocks to me is a pure, simple example of why it would make sense for someone that's anti-crypto because of speculation, or anti-crypto because you can buy drugs, or anti-crypto for whatever reason. People have kind of been scarred for crypto. I can give a non-crypto person a really viable use case reason why they should install MetaMask, and if they're into art or if they're into generative content. And I think that's kind of the 5-year goal, is that we literally will use artblocks as a vehicle to introduce people to crypto in the design world, in the art world, in the gaming world, wearables in and out of the crypto space can be generated on artblocks. So, if you have a leopard print shirt, you can make that generatively. And so everybody can have a different leopard print shirt if they want to in the crypto space, or in a virtual space. But yeah, that's the 5-year goal is really just kind of pushing this outside of blockchain, but using the technology in its pure and simple use case. And anyways, yeah, I'm rambling, so I'll stop myself there.
No, man, that's awesome. And you had touched on like the droponomics and the drop design, I think briefly, of the projects that have been launching on Artblocks, which I think is really smart. And it's been amazingly successful. Singularity by Hideki, I fucking woke up and I'd already missed it by a couple hours. That sold out way too quick. I was really bummed out about that, because that's a beautiful project. But I'm happy to have collected like dynamic slices and of course way too many squiggles, some of the Genesis by DCA and some good stuff, right? But I'm wondering if you could talk about how you kind of came around to designing these drops and thinking about that drop approach for Artblocks and the projects on it.
Yeah, so that's been 100% organic, right? So right before Artblocks launched, I had DCA, Jeff Davis, Chaos C is his username on Discord, and maybe like a handful of others that were tinkering, but like they didn't feel like they were really kind of like on board, right? But those guys were actually like, we actually had like live scripts on testnet for them. And I had this massive fear that like nobody was going to give a shit. And when I mean nobody, I don't necessarily mean the collectors. I thought the collectors were going to be into it, but the artists have to produce too. I have a backlog of like 5 or 6 script projects that I had ready to go in case I wasn't going to be able to have enough artist contributions to the platform. So, I had been having talks with a lot of artists. A lot of artists are like, yeah, I'll get you a script next week. But literally it was those 3 and that's it. So when Artblocks launched, I feel like I almost desperately was begging for artists to come in. Not begging, but I was like, all right, we have this artist application, please come and apply. And, I think people were very inspired by the first day of Artblocks. I think, 2 things selling out in a day and whatever. I think, obviously some of the artists that had been quiet but involved came out and started kind of putting their scripts on testnet and whatever. So that was really encouraging. I think they found obviously the economic value, but also kind of the thrill from the community and the way that they were describing the pieces of art. DCA's piece, I feel like some people like learned art or understood art for the first time. Just to these guys that we sit there and act like degens in the CryptoPunks Discord, we're sitting there describing like this surreal feeling, not surreal, like this kind of feeling that they saw when they looked at it, like it looks like a sunset. And I mean, you know, people were getting really deep into this, and these are not the degens that I had gotten to know over the last few months, right? So anyway, so that happened, and all of a sudden there was 25 artists on the application list within the first week. And right now we're sitting at, we haven't actually announced any more requests for artists, so like intentionally, and we're sitting at about 50 right now, of which a lot of them are people that I've been following and like have this kind of pedigree of, you know, generative art or code art or whatever. So it's insane. So what's happened is my goal was never to be doing drops like this. Like it was never about selling out the art. My goal is to have this like website, like a marketplace where you go and you can just be like, I've got $100. Let me go buy a couple pieces of art. Like, and that's still very much the long-term goal of artblocks. So, what happened is these pieces started selling out. And I was like, first of all, if there was a fly on the wall during drop days and you could see my face while the servers were melting, and like literally like Node Chef, which is this platform that I use to host because I'm such a noob at coding, literally like stopped responding, you know, like the whole thing shut down. It was erasing my servers. I think it thought that it was being attacked. I don't really know, but I mean, it was just like absolute madness and chaos. So it was terrifying. I mean, I just remember I remember one time just tweeting and being like, that was the most terrifying thing I've ever gone through. Like I didn't expect that it was going to be like that, but it was also like thrilling. Right. And so, you know, that's not the intention to sell out, but all of a sudden you've got collectors that are reaching out and saying, hey, look, I just want to let you know, like I'm buying 5 of each drop, maybe 10 of each drop. And I'm going to continue to buy 5 of each drop as long as you keep the quality of the artwork up and you keep the quality of the content up. Oh. And of course, we wanted the quality of the content to be amazing. But originally, the platform was going to be open. Like think of it as like, you know, generative art as a service, right? Like anybody that had the capability of creating a script could deploy something on artblocks. And that's still 100% part of the plan. But what I realized also coming from, you know, a total degen into Top Shot, like, I mean, literally Artblocks was delayed by 2 months because I spent 5 hours a day trading, you know, LeBron James cards on Top Shot. Like there was just no time to be developing Artblocks. But what it kind of turned into was this like Top Shot for people that aren't into sports, or even if they are into sports that are also into art. And it made me really kind of look at going extra far to make sure that I'm not just curating the initial content, because people are looking at this as like a collection and they're buying it not because in some cases they might buy some pieces not because they love that piece of art, but because now they're driven to have a full collection, which, you know, as someone that spent 3 months like desperately making offers on CryptoPunks to eventually be able to put together a full attribute collection, I see a major value in that.
Yeah.
And so what I want to make sure then is that nobody is buying something that they just hate, like that feels like it's not at that same caliber as the stuff that's already been on there. So what's happening with the drops is that we realize that they're going to, you know, as long as the content is good, people are going to buy them. And we're trying to make sure that the level stays top notch. And what we've done to enable that is we've kind of created this curation board. So that curation board, which I'm separate from at this point, because I don't want to be a bad guy, right? Like, I mean, if there's 15 professionals on this board, or there will be when it's all said and done, and these 15 professionals are experts in their field. They know, they are art collectors, they are art gallery owners. If they think that a piece of art is not something that meets the standards of kind of what's put out on Artblocks, and they say, hey, like, can you go back and adjust this thing? I will defer to them. And I really think that it's necessary to do that to maintain this, what we're calling like the Artblocks collection, as something that is holy, you know, and something that, you know, I would want to keep collecting and that everybody would want to keep collecting. And part of that is also containing the total value that can be generated from a single drop. Like something I always kind of got frustrated about with Top Shot is that like they just kept draining my wallet. Like literally I had no free ETH over those couple of months because it's like every week there was another drop and I had to go buy all of this. And sometimes I wasn't so excited about it, but I did anyways. And it was just like relentless. So, a Top Shot drop would raise 1,000 ETH in 30 seconds, like, or 3 minutes, and I definitely thought that it got a little bit overbearing. And so what we've done is we've kind of capped it to like, for now, we're going to tie it to user base. So right now there's maybe 300 active people minting on each drop. And so we're going to keep it to like between 50 and 100 ETH per drop. And then we're not going to raise that ceiling no matter how good the artist is until we have more people to collect that work. And so that's kind of what's kind of turned into this drop mentality, which literally was not the intention for artblocks. So as of the first curated artists are being submitted to the board this week, and as of that moment, we will have a kind of quote unquote official artblocks set that is paying attention to art quality, originality, and very much trying to keep in mind the collectors and make sure that they're not feeling like they're being strained in terms of the drops and stuff. And then we're going to have a separate section for artists that have already been curated that they can kind of create their own little storefronts. Because a lot of these artists literally have like 100 scripts, right? And these won't necessarily be announced as drops. These would just be added to the platform and the artists would deploy them and the artists would announce them the same way they announce something on Known Origin, right? Like Known Origin doesn't go out and say, all right, so-and-so is dropping this at 5 o'clock for every single piece of art. And at that point, if the artist overdoes it, it's the artist that's overdoing it, right? Artblocks is not the one that's putting out too much art because we're curating and maintaining this kind of limited collection that we do feel is a worthwhile purchase for collectors to like kind of keep one of each one. And then the last section, which is the one I'm most excited about long term, and also the one that Artblocks was built for, is the kind of Artblocks as a service type thing, where anybody that has the skills, the minimum skills to be able to write code, will be able to deploy a project on there. It'll still have to go through curation just to make sure that there's not any security issues in the scripts. It'll still go through curation just to make sure that it'll function, that it still has to have a minimal amount of functionality, but I'm not going to judge somebody for if they want to do a red background and a blue background and a green background. I guess like if they want to put their name out there as someone that's doing that, then they can do that. And the reason that is so important is because long-term Artblocks, I want a browsable website. And I think kind of splitting it and having it into these three components allows us to do that. It allows to have the hype and the excitement of like these more curated drops, which we are just going out of our way to research and make sure are clean and whatever. Then you have like the little middle area, which is the artist storefronts, that it's just a little premium or a perk for having been curated before. Also, it's a little bit less resource intensive for us because they've already launched, and launching a project on Artblocks the first time is a very technical endeavor, and it's not for the faint of heart. And then we're going to have this other section where, we might actually, like I've started, I have an agreement with one of the community members where I'm going to pay them for every person that they onboard. So there's going to, because it's a 2 to 3 hour commitment. So there is going to be a fixed fee, but not a profit generating fee, but there's going to be a fixed fee for someone that wants to put something on Artblocks, just like there's a fixed fee for someone to mint a token on Rarible if they want. And hopefully that fee is going to make people think real hard about whether they actually want to put something on the platform or not. Not to mention the fact that if their script is really long, it could cost $1,000 just to deploy the script. So I think that there's going to be some self-curation there as well. But yeah, that's kind of the concept of the drops and kind of how it turned into this madness that it is. I'm terrified right before the drop, and I feel this crazy euphoria after each drop. And I feel like the similar feelings are felt in the Discord. It's just been a lot of fun.
Dude, you're killing it. I got to say, like, prior to this conversation, I had like a fairly decent, like, layman's overview of like the project and what you got going on, but really didn't know like the wide range of like current implications and future implications of the project and the technology that you've created over there. And it's astounding. So everything moving forward is essentially built off of this, or do you see like future iterations of this needing to be built to accomplish these things?
Oh yeah, no, there's going to be plenty of modification. I mean, even last night in the server, there was some cool discussions about, one project being able to take feedback from a previous token and things like that. The current version of artblocks is a core contract that stores NFTs only, and it was upgraded to be incredibly flexible already to kind of, I think, hold us out for at least the year, right? So, I mean, ultimately, when you go on OpenSea, there's actually 2 artblocks contracts already because I upgraded the first one after the first week, but it's a seamless experience. It still would be ideal not to have like 25 artblocks contracts because they're all part of the same collection. So we're going to be very, very careful as to when we put out new features, and definitely base it on a growing user base that is starting to demand those new features, not just like, nerding out in the channel like we were last night with like, oh, this would be cool, whatever. Yeah, it would be cool, but it's infrastructure wise, it's just like one more notch of complication. And so, let's wait until someone actually has built something out that would just be so epic that it would feel stupid not to do it. So similarly, the reason that artblocks version 2 came out was because we wanted to be able to accept ERC20 tokens. So like today, there's a project that's available for 17 DAI on the platform. Gas is probably more than that to mint. So obviously we always deal with that. And also to add some interesting mechanics, like what I can do is I can whitelist a minter that, for example, you have to burn a Chromie squiggle to buy another type of Chromie squiggle if I ever were to release another Chromie squiggle, or you have to own an Avastar to be able to purchase this piece. And part of that is built in because after day 1, I started panicking about the possibility of people starting to bot this, right? So obviously you can never avoid that. And, there's always going to be like some way to get around it. But what I did is I built this kind of separate minting contract so that, we could potentially, if there's going to be some major release and something that I do feel is just going to go real fast, I respect what Nifty Gateway does, but we don't want to ever get to that level of like hysteria. Like I would really like not to get to that level of hysteria. And so, we have implemented this separate minter that might, like I said, it might require that you own a CryptoPunk, or it might require that you own a previous work minted on artblocks, or it might, whatever it might be, to be able to enable a little bit of controlling and also to add some kind of fun gaming mechanics to it. Like there's some DeFi projects that are doing some pretty cool things that are going to involve artblocks, where, you finally have like a purpose for the DeFi staking reward. I mean, obviously up until now, DeFi staking is like, okay, yeah, now you earn it and then you go sell it or you hold it because it's crypto, right? So if you're stupid like me, you hold everything for like 5 years and then you just watch it go to zero. But if the idea that now somebody can use this ERC20 token that is being created out of thin air, because that's what blockchain allows you to do, but instead of going and trying to sell it on the secondary market, maybe now there's an addition on artblocks that there's only 100 of them that are ever going to be minted. And so now you're sitting there mining so that you can get enough tokens to mint a piece on artblocks. And then also then you can have fun with the whole bonded curve deal where like you could say, well, instead of minting that token, I'm going to hold on to my token and watch other people mint it. And then maybe there's, excitement around the project and all of a sudden the token that I mined is worth a little bit more, et cetera. So those things are being built into the contract on the minting side. Things like artists can right now allow you to, if they have a social token. So I feel real bad for Jeff because like when he launched his project, this wasn't in existence. So he offered 400 of his social currency to everybody that minted one of his pieces. And then he sold 500 pieces in 3 hours, right? So he had to do 500 individual transactions. So part of that upgrade was that right now, if an artist has a social token, they can set up the contract to where an X amount of a social token is minted automatically and sent to the collector at the time of minting. And so, these kinds of things are kind of the expansion that I have planned for now. I do not want to touch it for a little while because I'm overwhelmed with all of the other aspects of the platform, like the front end and just the server and stuff like that. But absolutely, artblocks will have iterations in the future. And they will be, I have some secret stuff planned that I think is going to be revolutionary when there's enough of a user base to kind of justify them. And then there's just some straight up fun stuff like what was discussed in the server that would be fun to implement when the time comes.
Holy crap, dude.
Secret revolutionary stuff.
Seriously, +1 to that. You've already shared so much with us. I have like a million more questions, but I'll probably just cap it for my own personal set of questions here, and then Rizzle can wrap up with his infamous question. But we kind of, I think we mentioned licenses, and I know like it's been interesting to see on the different projects. There's the ability to have like full commercial rights conferred on to the buyers, and some of them are just the traditional, like you buy it and you own it and you can't really do anything extra besides that. But I'm just curious if you have any ideas or thoughts behind the different license arrangements of the different projects and where you see that kind of expanding out for into the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can all be kind of stubborn, and I'm fully aware of like my limitations, and even I feel like I'm a very open-minded person, but even I can get a little bit stubborn and hard to get out of my little box. And so like I remember at the beginning of the year, I was like, I wouldn't want to buy a piece of digital art if I didn't have the right to print it. And in my mind, I was like, fine, if the artist doesn't want me to print it, that's fine. But I feel like that should be very clearly stated somewhere, because I think it's really weird that maybe because I'm older, right? Like I want a framed, beautifully matted piece on the wall. And I have too many pieces now to do that. Like there's not enough walls in Texas to be able to like hang all that art. But conceptually, like it just blew my mind that like I said very like strongly, and I think it was the CryptoPunks Discord, I was like, I am not interested in a piece of art I can't print. And I said that very stubbornly and dogmatically. And I feel so opposite to that now that it's like just my mind is blown at just like how ignorant I feel like I was at the time. And that was only like 8 months ago. Right. So, we do have to be open-minded to like what technology brings to the table. So, I mean, I still probably would not want to buy a piece of crypto art where the artist was like, you can't print this. I respect that. I would like to have the right that if one day I just fell in love with a piece enough to put it in my living room, I would do that. But what happened is in March, I came out with this project kind of as a proof of concept, precursor to what I'm doing with artblocks, where it was called a print registry. And so this print registry basically was very straightforward. There was a smart contract that would accept your money, and I would print a piece, like an authenticated version of this, whatever the art was. And at that point I was doing Avastars and CryptoPunks, if you owned it. So my commitment as a printer was that nothing would be printed unless it went through the smart contract. And therefore, if you didn't own it, it would fail and you would not be able to print your piece. And so if it made it through the smart contract, then that smart contract had a record of the fact that this has been printed. Obviously that can be printed 100 times without going through the contract, but it has been printed, and it was printed by the owner. And then there would be an NFC sticker that I would put on there that you could scan that would take you to this registry that would show just the details of like when it was printed, et cetera. So I got really mixed reviews from that. That's where I kind of met artists that were like, well, if you're printing it, I only allow my art printed on matte paper. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I actually agree with some of that. Like I have some pieces, like I was printing chromies the other day just for fun. And I came to the conclusion that I kind of would cringe if I saw a chromie printed on glossy paper, but I mean, mine is an NFT license, right? You can literally kind of do whatever you want with it. But I mean, I realized like that as an artist, as my babies are being born, I want those babies to be printed on matte paper. So that kind of evolved into, this whole license, like serious license consideration in terms of like the feelings of the artist actually really, really, really are as valuable in the space as the art that they're producing. And, at the time it was kind of when secondary royalties were becoming a real big thing. And like Twitter was a shit show. Like I just got off Twitter. It was just so bad, like so much like anger and frustration. And at first I didn't necessarily agree that secondary royalties were like required. Like I felt like, because I come from the traditional art world, no artist I know has ever benefited from that. And then, someone was like, Eric, quit being a dumbass. Like you're all about the technology. Why would you not support it if the technology didn't exist before and now it exists to allow it? That's awesome. Let the artists benefit from their own success down the road. And it's not that I didn't want the artist to make the royalty. It's that I didn't feel like the crypto space had to go down this toxic wormhole because of something like that. Like it literally turned me off for, crypto art for a good amount of time. So if you take that into consideration and kind of like now we have secondary market royalties that hopefully the marketplaces are going to be a little bit more open-ended and kind of absorb. Right now you have beautiful things like OpenSea, which let you set the royalties and they send it every 2 weeks. It's been great. Artists on artblocks have not received a single secondary market royalty because I have not been able to parse the thousands of transactions that have happened. And I apologize to those artists right now, but they've been very patient with me and they know that the money's coming. But yeah, like the licensing, I think, is something that's going to be critical because you have things like Avastars that you can literally do whatever you want with. You have things like Squiggles that you can pretty much do whatever you want with. And then you have things like on Artblocks like that use the Creative Commons licenses that are a little bit more controlling. Again, this is something that never really existed. When a painter painted with like oil on canvas, there was no license attached to that. I mean, there's some inherent licenses, but they probably weren't even thinking about licensing when they were making it, especially if it was early on, kind of back to the provenance thing. Like early on, when your art isn't incredibly valuable, these things do not cross your mind. But when you see your art traded for $10,000 when you originally sold it for $200, then you're like, holy crap. And so the technology enables this, like Artblocks, you get to set your license when you deploy. And the whole reason I brought up the print registry is because, soon we're going to have the Artblocks print registry, and it's going to be a smart contract, and it's going to allow multiple providers to print. Like I got to the point where I just didn't enjoy the printing part. It was such a pain in the butt. So we'll have that outsourced to multiple providers, but the artists are going to be able to go in there and say, yes, you can print my artwork. You can print up to 3 versions of my artwork. You can print my artwork once a year. And the smart contract will be able to kind of at least enforce some of those mechanics. And then the artist will be able to say, you can put my stuff on matte paper. You can hang this stuff in your house, but you can't do it in a commercial, whatever that might be. The technology is enabling, just as it's enabling provenance, it's enabling licensing to be easily expressed and not any more enforceable than traditional art. Obviously, like there's, like who's going to be policing it. But if it ever came down to it, there is now immutable proof of the artist's intentions. And I'm really excited about that. I think that for the future of Artblocks and kind of some of the design directions that I want to take it, where I'm approaching, maybe the commercial art world, like if a hotel has 100 pieces of the same exact piece of art in every single room, or 5 different pieces of art in every single room, like why would they not generate 100 different ones? But then like who owns the art, and can the guest buy that token on OpenSea while they're sitting in the room? Like those kinds of crazy things that are, down the line. I feel like being able to really manage licensing with each of those pieces from the root is important and very valuable in this space.
Hell yeah, dude. Yo, man, it has come time for the shakedown, and interested to know. I mean, you've already mentioned Punks, Avastars, NBA Top Shot as some of like the big projects that you've been, most interested in. But always curious to know like what other things people are tinkering around with in their spare time, and what just sort of like, geeky NFT hobbies you might have that don't necessarily have to do with anything that you're currently working on, but just for the sake of having fun. And I have a feeling NBA Top Shot is certainly one of those. But is there anything else that falls into that category?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I gave up on NBA Top Shot, right? So like I was collecting like 7 base sets and all. I mean, I literally had I still do. I have a massive collection, but when Artblocks kind of started taking off, I literally had to stop. Like I just could not dedicate that time to it. For me, the things that I'm most excited in this space are kind of me blindly saying that anything that like Jimmy and Nate and that team of people are doing, literally, like I don't really care what it is. I am interested in what they're doing because of literally, like they've paved the existence of a lot of what I'm doing, and they've paved like the mindset. They've educated more of a group of the blockchain enthusiasts than I think any other project has successfully done. So anything that comes out of there, I'm super excited about. Anything that Nate's like, I think he's a genius with his mechanics and his artwork and whatever he's doing, like anything he's going to come up with, I'm excited about. I'm genuinely really excited about, there's a lot of other platforms that are coming up that are generative art based, and I'm freaking excited about them. I'm excited. They're all a little bit different. They're all going to have different mechanics. And even if they had the same mechanic as Artblocks, like to me, it's really, really special to kind of get that validation. Obviously, we have validation from the community. I have artists saying that for the first time in their generative career, they finally feel like they have a place for their art. So the validation there is significant. But seeing 3 or 4 new generative art platforms launch since artblocks launched, and most of them were in the works before artblocks launched. So it's not like they were like, "Ooh, this is cool, let's go do this." No, I mean, you can tell that these guys have been spending lots of time thinking about this. Like, this isn't something you can just kind of whip up. I'm genuinely excited about that. And then just as a punk OG, anything that has anything to do with punks, I'm going to go down that wormhole. I'm currently neck deep in Niftex or NFTX Niftex because they're doing some things with punks and creating a basket of NFTs, not just punks, but obviously a bunch of NFTs. But they really embrace punks, and punks are the reason I am here today. Punks are the reason that I've been able to kind of finance some of the things that I've been doing. I mean, I've sold some things this year that have actually kind of taken money out of blockchain for the first time in my blockchain career and done some physical things with it. So punks, autoglyphs, and I have this dream that Larva Labs will launch their next project on artblocks because they are generative based, but obviously they have more than enough capabilities of just doing it on their own. But yeah, Larva Labs and what they do, I think between them and what NFT 42 is doing, I feel like I have enough to consume any extra moment that I have in my life, and I'm excited about anything that they're doing.
Amazing, man. Well, I just want to thank you for the time that you've taken to share all of this amazing information and details on the project and the background and your insights into where the space is going. It's been absolutely fascinating. Before we actually wrap up, I just want to make sure we give you the chance real quick to kind of hit people with the sites and the Discords that they need to be following. And if there's any like near-term drops or upcoming projects that are set to launch that you want to let folks know about, now's the time to share real quick.
Yeah, so we have a drop on Friday. One of the coolest generative artists that I've been following even before Artblocks, and that is happening at noon Central Time. It's a purely on-chain 3D rendered madness of a piece. And artblocks.io is the website. The Discord link sometimes is broken because every time there's some new spam people, I just shut down the invite. So please just be patient and send me an email, or reach out if you want to get on Discord, and the Discord link is broken. And yeah, I mean, like look for Artblocks to really kind of expand over the course of the next couple of months. I've brought my first kind of official contract, actually 2 contracts with people already. I'm working on a third one. Like this, the team is growing. Like this is happening way faster than expected. So look for that in the next few months. And also just real quick, there's a lot of people that have been incredibly helpful and instrumental for me during this process. And I think they know exactly who they are. I really just, I couldn't be more grateful for these people that have literally spent hours with me on video calls and Discord chats and phone calls, like basically babysitting me while I'm freaking out about what's happening with Artblocks. So major thanks to those folks. They know exactly who they are, and I don't necessarily want to call them out, but major thanks to them, and to you guys for letting me participate in the whip a few months ago. I mean, that literally kind of got me, gave me the confidence to do what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm just super grateful all around for everything.
There we go. Well, thank you so much once again for sharing with us and for creating this amazing platform that's producing some of the most exciting generative art, in my opinion, in the world. So keep doing what you're doing, and yeah, keep creating.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's such a pleasure to speak to you all, and I guess we'll see you tomorrow at the whip.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode. And I just want to remind you of this month's sponsor, Aavegotchi. Aavegotchis are on-chain collectible ghosts staked with Aave's interest-generating A tokens. Compete for player rewards by earning XP, leveling up, and increasing the rarity of your Aavegotchi friend. Owned by the community, Aavegotchi is governed by the Aavegotchi DAO and the native eco-governance token, Ghost, or GHST. Summon your first Aavegotchi today and join the future of DeFi staked NFT avatars. Follow Aavegotchi on Twitter at Aavegotchi, AAVEGOTCHI, or on Discord at discord.gg/6R2PE58. That's discord.gg/6R2PE58. Thank you, and see you next episode.